Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am the Takunome, and welcome to my humble slices of the internet that are my Twitch channel and YouTube channel. How is everyone doing today? Hope that you're having a good day so far, that things have been going pretty well for you. And if today or even this week has not been the best week, or maybe it could have been better, well, I do hope that this reading stream could be a bit of a bright spot to your day. Tonight, we will be continuing the book Clockwork Twist, Book 9, Home by Emily Thompson. Now, for those who may be new to the reading stream, or perhaps you don't really remember who our author is, allow me the opportunity to read, well, their bio. So, who is Emily Thompson? Emily Thompson is a non-binary author originally from Northern California. Although they adore steampunk and all things Victoriana, they also write science fiction and fantasy. After studying film and animation in university, Emily changed to a Japanese language focus and studied in Tokyo. After receiving a language degree and spending a number of years abroad, they now live in Washington and spend most of their free time writing in coffee shops, painting, crocheting plushies, coding, and playing lots of cozy video games. And there you have it. That is our author for the evening. And I have their book in hand, ready to go, which I am looking at how much we have left. We still have a good portion to go. I will say, based on what I am seeing as far as thickness, let's see. I believe we have 2 to 3 more streams for this book before it is time to get ready for our next book, which I will have to order. Nevertheless, news for the channel. Let's see. Well, it is the beginning of May, and I believe I mentioned last stream that starting next month, I believe the reading stream will move from Saturday evenings over to Sunday evenings. I'm sorry, I'm hearing something, a weird noise in my room, and I'm not sure what it is. A little concerning, but I think we're okay. But as I said, starting next month, I believe we will move from Saturday evenings to Sunday evenings. So what does this mean for you, dear listener? Well, obviously, that I will be doing live streaming on Sunday evenings as opposed, which means if there are things that you wanted to do on a Saturday evening, because I know that is a rather popular evening, then you'll be free to do so and then potentially join the live version on this Sunday evening, right before you go to bed, maybe. Also, starting next month, I have not fully decided if I'm going to do this or not, but the reading stream, even though it will be on Sunday evenings, there is a chance one Sunday out of each month I may not do the reading stream. A planned no reading stream time. And for those who may be wondering, here's why. This is all part of some of the things that I was thinking about last month, and that in a way I need to step back from streaming and focus on other aspects of my life. However, I do still enjoy the reading stream, and I don't want to stop doing that anytime soon. So, as a compromise, I will continue to do the reading stream, of course, and most likely on Sunday evenings, but one Sunday evening at least every month, I am going to take time for myself just so I can recuperate and focus on other projects that I may have, so on and so forth. And I see, Ashley, my little sister, is in chat. Hello. Glad you can make it. Hope that you will enjoy this stream tonight. How are you doing? I'm actually steeping my tea a little bit more here. Let's see. Anything else before we continue? I believe that is everything that I have for now. From Justia, I'm well. How are you? I am. Hmm. Honestly, I am a little tired. I've been awake maybe since 5 o'clock this morning, but I am still looking forward to the reading stream. And Erudite, the author of this book, is also in chat. They say, hello, Taka's little sister. I don't think, Erudite, if you're able to answer this or not, I'm not certain. However, I don't think you have met members of my family before. I cannot remember. For those who may not know, or maybe you're very, very new to the reading stream, I have mentioned this before. I do know the author personally, as we did get to spend time together in Japan in the same class, as well as going to the 1OK Rock concert. But that is a story for another time. Let's see, we have our tea, we have our water, we have our book ready to go. I believe, actually, let's make sure that I can see chat here. Not that I'll be reading chat during the stream, but I would like to know if something new comes through or not. And with that, I believe we are ready. I'm really hoping for not a lot of mirror dialogue today, but we will see what we can do. So, here we are. Clockwork Twist, Book 9, Home, by Emily Thompson. We are currently on page 245. And with that, let's begin. While Twist glanced around his cabin to make sure that he hadn't missed anything he wanted to pack, he suddenly heard the heavy thud of hurried footsteps on the boards above him. A moment later, Kima appeared at his open cabin door, her expression one of fright. "Where's Jonas?" she asked, quick in thought. "Third door on the left," Twist answered swiftly. "What happened?" Instead of answering, Kima only rushed down the hall. Mira snatched up the bag she had just been fastening while Twist took his own in hand as well, and they both followed after Kima. "What's going on?" was asking, already standing in the doorway of his old cabin, with the bag slung over his shoulder when Kima reached him. "Pumice says there's something wrong with the clouds," Kima said, taking his hand as she began to lead him away. "Come look at them." Jonas didn't protest, and he hurried to keep up as Twist and Mira followed behind him. Climbing up the stairs to the deck, they met Arabelle and Howl. "Kima, what is it?" Arabelle asked as she and Jonas rushed by her. "Do you see anything?" Kima asked Jonas, clinging to his hand as they both now looked up to the thick gray and white clouds above. "Well, there's a storm building," Jonas said, frowning as his purple eyes scanned the sky. "But I don't see anything unusual. What did Pamus say?" "He said he felt magic on the air and that the clouds were wrong," Kiba answered. "Magic?" Jonas asked, nearly catching her gaze as he looked to her in surprise. "Where is Pamut?" Kima nodded back toward the Icarus behind them. "I left him with Adair. Pamut's terrified. He just kept saying the same thing over and over and shaking." "Well, now I'm scared," Jonas muttered, looking to the sky again. "I'm telling you, I don't see anything strange up there." "John?" Arabelle began, approaching her brother while the clouds above suddenly darkened into cold blue and stony tones, churning like a writhing beast. What's all this about? Arabelle's words stopped abruptly as a bolt of lightning struck the edge of the Vimana's deck with a savage and frightening sound. Everyone on the deck backed away a step, covering their eyes against the brilliant flash. Mira clung to Twist, her startled fear rushing through his own like a shot. When Twist looked to where the bolt had struck, he saw that a small figure, its head bowed, now crouched on the scorched patch of wood. Twist noticed two short horns on the top of his head and a pair of cloven hooved feet planted on the wood as the figure stood up. His eyes were a brilliant and sweet pink color, and his shaggy hair as white as snow, but he otherwise looked exactly like Pyrmont, wearing the complex contraption over his eye that allowed him to see through Twist and Jonas's charms. Storm put on a terrifying smile. Damn your keen eyes, John, Storm purred, sending a shiver down Twist's spine. Mira let out a shriek, her terror building nearly high enough to make her faint as she clung desperately to Twist's arm. Too confused and dumbstruck to move yet, Twist could only stare back at the murderous satyr. Jonas was frozen as well, his fear flashing like electricity in the buzzing at Twist's neck. What are you doing here? Kima asked, her voice as cold and strong as stone. Now then, Storm said, seeming to ignore her as he raised a hand. Without warning, Twist felt himself pulled forcefully to his knees as the satyr, still well out of physical reach, closed a fist. Jonas also fell at the same exact moment, while no one else on the deck seemed at all affected. Mira yelped in surprise, instantly struggling to help Twist back up as Kima did with Jonas. But no matter anyone's effort, Twist and Jonas couldn't rise. The Vimana crew rushed toward the satyr, shouting for him to release their friends. But Storm, hearing their approach but not apparently able to see them clearly, tossed them all fully on off their feet with a single wave of his hand, sending them crashing down on the deck. Apologies. One moment. Let us resume. Where were we? Storm asked, stepping closer to Twist and Jonas on the hooves as he drew a pair of short swords from behind his back. Animal panic rushed through Twist's spirit like an arctic wind, knowing full well that Storm's goal was to kill him and Jonas together, and as quickly as possible. Hey, goat boy! Quay's voice shouted from one side. A wave of annoyance washed over Storm's sinister grin, and he looked toward the source of the voice with one hand already raised to fling again. Quay rushed the last step across the plank, connecting the Icarus to the Vimana, and Storm waved a hand. Quay threw himself down and forward onto the deck of the Vimana, while a violent wind shoved him back only an inch, but the true force of the blast clearly passed mostly over the top of him. Not seeming to notice that he missed, as Quay rose swiftly back to his feet and continued to advance, Storm turned his attention back to Twist and Jonas as Quay came within reach of him. Without slowing a step, Quay grabbed hold of the satyr's arm, hauling him clear off his hooves. Storm let out a startled sound and struggled vainly against the pirate's grip until Quay reached the far side of the deck. He then threw the satyr fully over the side into the forest of pine trees below, while Storm screamed in horror. Quay turned to Twist and Jonas as Twist found that he suddenly had the power to stand up once again. I was Storm, I take it, Quay said, offering Jonas a hand to help him up. Am I drunk, or did he look exactly like Pumut? How did he find us? Kima asked, looking at once relieved and bewildered. Did you just kill him? Jonas, why couldn't you see that he was in the clouds? What if he comes back? Kima, be still, Jonas said sternly, taking both of her shoulders in his hands as if to hold her steady and looking dangerously close to her eyes. Panic isn't going to help, he said, his voice taking on a gentle tone. Kima dropped her gaze safely away from his and nodded, visibly struggling to calm herself. You're right. She snapped her eyes shut as her hands reached for him, clinging at fabric where they could and pulling him closer. Jonas, I'm so scared, she confessed on the shaking breath. So am I, Jonas replied softly, his arms moving to hold her gently. Kima finally got hold of her fear and appeared to calm, standing tall and breathing slow. Jonas let go of her and looked to Twist with yellow eyes. Mira clung tightly to Twist's arm, her fear bubbling over his sight, but Twist struggled to follow Jonas's advice as well and keep his head clear for now. There was no time to indulge in panic. They had to find safety before the satyr attacked again. What the bloody hell is this blackguard doing here? Howell bellowed, glaring at Quay as he and his crew finally managed to regain their footing. You haven't told them I was here yet, Quay snapped at Jonas. This is a complicated day, Jonas answered swiftly. He then paused before continuing on more calmly. Thank you, Adair. That was quick thinking, but after everything I've seen him do, I seriously doubt being tossed into a tree is going to slow Storm down too much. We all have to leave now. I'll light the engines, Zell offered, already turning to go. No, the Icarus is faster, Jonas said, making him pause. Everyone, get aboard, he added with a wave to the Vimana's crew. We have to stay together. I'm not leaving my ship behind, Howell barked. It'll be fine. Since when are you giving orders anyway? Howell grumbled on. Holy hell, Jonas moaned. There's no time for this. Says you, Howell began. Captain, Ozzy's voice snapped. He's right. The ship is already warded, she said to Howell, pointing to the Icarus. The satyr can't find us if we're warded. You heard the lady, Quay said with a smirk, gesturing to the gangway. Howell, not moving, narrowed his eyes at Quay. His crew looked to him as if awaiting orders. Come on, Jonas ordered. We can fight about this while we're running. Fine, Howell grumbled, making a great show of being convinced. His crew moved as one, following as Howell stepped toward the gangway. But Twist noticed that while Ozzy's face was hidden, Philippe and Zell both looked relieved by his decision. Arabelle scowled at Quay, but didn't complain verbally. I'll get to the engines, Twist said, taking Mira's hand as he hurried to board the Icarus ahead of the others. Good man, Jonas called after him as everyone moved to follow him. Twist kept his eyes level across the gap until he and Mira set foot aboard the Icarus once again, and then he turned for the bridge. Oh, look! Mira gasped, stilling him for a second. She pointed to where Pamut sat, curled in tight ball and quivering in the mild shelter of a large crate on the deck. Go on, dear, Mira said, retrieving her hand from Twist's. I'll see to him. Twist nodded, turning to hurry onto the bridge. He dropped his bag as he ran and then dove into the bridge and down the stairs to the engine controls. He did his very best to calm his mind, even enough to do what he needed to do to start the engines. It felt like an eternity as he waited for the metal in the chamber to warm enough to allow the engines to fire. Outside, he heard thunder roar from very close above the ship, and rain pounded against the hull. How we doing? Jonas asked, entering the bridge above him a moment later. Nearly there, Twist called back. Don't wait to warn anyone, Jonas said. Adair's loosening the ropes now, and everyone's on board. Just open the engines up the instant you're able. Understood, Twist confirmed, watching the heat sensors on the engines through his sight and begging them to tip. And what about my ship? Twist heard Howl ask from the bridge above. Storm isn't interested in airships, Jonas snapped back. He doesn't even need them to get around, as we all clearly saw with that lightning routine. The Vimana will be fine. If we took the Vimana, we've already have left by now, Howell grumbled. This ship is faster than anything in the sky once she gets going, Jonas countered. But where did that boy even come from? Arabelle's voice asked. I thought he was in prison. Suddenly, the sensors on the engines tilted, completing the vital circuit. This time, Twist didn't recklessly throw the engines into full speed, but he instead fired them and then eased the speed up faster and faster. Some of the voices above him let out startled sounds as the airship leaped forward suddenly, but this time, Twist and the others weren't thrown so violently backwards. After the initial start, the flight remained smooth as the speed rose. Twist felt no strain on the engines at all as he pushed them to their limit, making the ship sing in elated bliss. Nice start, Twist, Jonas called down as he felt the ship bank into a turn and rise high into the sky. You're getting good at that. Twist leaned against a spare bit of wall beside the speed control and allowed himself a moment to breathe and relax, once again safely on the move. Between Pamut's magic and the Icarus's top speed, Storm would surely have a tough time finding them again. Here we're taking a chapter break. I knew at some point that we would come across Storm again. I did not know that this would be how we come across Storm again, and so soon. I felt that we just recently put him in jail, but magic creatures do magic creature things. And we're going to try a sip of this tea. Let's see how it tastes. Ooh, smells nice. It smells really nice, actually. Hmm, it is an interesting taste. I'm sure I'm going to talk more about it during our non-sponsor sponsor, but definitely not a sponsorship sponsor. Mm. Oh, it is pleasant to say the least. But we will talk more about the tea after the next chapter or two. Before we go into the next chapter, I want to take the time to thank you all for joining this reading stream, whether you're here live on Twitch or YouTube or listening to a VOD. I do appreciate all the support that you give this channel, and I do hope that you are enjoying the story as well as the reading of this story. And with that, let us go into our next chapter. Jonas brought the ship up to the top of the sky, flying high above a thick blanket of clouds that seemed to fill the wide world below the midday sky, stretching out to every unbroken horizon. Hopefully, they would be safe this high above the clouds. He set the autopilot to keep them aloft, flying at the ship's best speed and heading nowhere in particular, and then left the bridge with Twist to join the others on the deck. Mira and Kima are standing with Pamut, who seem to be calming down thanks to their efforts. The entire Vimana crew stood together on the Icarus's glass-covered deck, all appearing startled and confused by the recent events. To Twist's surprise, Quay stood on the deck as well, on the other side of Mira, Kima, and Pamut, while the Vimana's crew glanced at the pirate with a cold eye from time to time. The moment Kima saw Jonas approach, she hurried to him, her face grim and obviously struggling against tears. Jonas took her in his arms without any hesitation. Kima melted into his embrace, her breathing ragged and her dampening face hidden in his collar. It's all right, Jonas said gently to her. He's gone for now. I never thought I'd have to see him again, Kima muttered into his collar, her voice strained and shaking. I know, Jonas said, still speaking gently. But you're not alone this time. We're all here for you. We'll fight beside you. Kima visibly relaxed as he spoke, seeming to take his soothing words to heart. She pulled back, looking much more calm as she wiped at her face, but she kept her eyes low as she remained close to Jonas. Thank you, she said softly before glancing up. But shouldn't I be comforting you? He's trying to murder you, after all. Jonas put on a roguish smile. I've got you fighting at my side. What do I have to be worried about? Kima smiled at this, obviously taking Jonas's words more as a joke than anything else. Twist watched them silently, seeing every evidence of deep friendship and trust building between them. He glanced to the Vimana's crew to find that they, however, were all staring at Jonas and Kima in mild surprise. So, we're safe now, right? Quay asked. Can we talk about what the hell is going on? Kima turned away from Jonas. He quietly took her hand, keeping her close with a subtle gesture as they and Twist joined the others. Kima didn't show any sign of complaint against it. Indeed, Howell mentioned, his hateful gaze trained solidly on Quay. John, what is this bastard even doing on your ship? Jonas groaned. We're doing this now? While the Vimana's crew looked at Jonas unhappily, Quay seemed concerned. Doing what? Quay asked sharply. I don't mind you knowing, John, he added before glancing distastefully at the Vimana's crew. But as for them, the past can stay dead and buried for all I care. How are you talking about? Apologies, that's the wrong line. One more time. What are you talking about? Howell asked suspiciously. What nonsense has this cur been telling you, John? Is that how he got on your ship? He's spun you some story? All I said was the truth, Quay growled. Adair, relax, Jonas said wearily. I don't want to talk about it either. Right, Quay muttered, his ire cooling. Sorry, he offered to Jonas. What the hell is going on here? Arabelle demanded of her brother. While everyone on the deck looked to Jonas to answer, he paused thoughtfully. He then turned to Kima and gave her a weak, almost pleading smile, looking very near to her eyes as he did. If you ask very nicely, he began, his tone sweet. Will you hit me hard if I ask you very nicely? He began, his tone sweet. Apologies. Would you hit me hard enough to knock me out so I won't have to answer any of them? While the others huffed and tutted, Kima looked back to Jonas compassionately. That would only put it off, she answered, her voice gentle. Jonas nodded with a sigh. Not that it's really your problem to solve, she added. After all, you had no part in any of it. It's those two who need to do the talking, she said with a gesture to Quay and Howell. Howell and Quay both bristled at this accusation, shooting acid looks at each other, while the rest of the Vimana's crew seemed intrigued by Kima's implications. Mira, however, smiled at Kima approvingly. Twist nearly spoke up to agree with Kima's sentiment, but paused when he felt the buzzing at his neck warm suddenly into a smooth calm. Kima, you're wonderful, Jonas declared. Kima's initial surprise at the compliment melted quickly into a pleased expression. Arabelle, however, stared at her brother in obvious shock. Twist could only shake his head, easily able to imagine Arabelle's surprise to hear Jonas speak his thoughts so plainly. Standing beside a still, rather dazed-looking Pamut, Mira chuckled quietly into her hand, apparently charmed by the entire event. Kima's right, Jonas announced to the others. You two sort yourselves out. The only thing we're getting out of me is that Adair is a member of my crew, and that's final. While everyone else gestured uselessly and puffed with shock, dismay, or anger, Jonas ignored all of them and stepped closer to Pamut calmly. Now, how are you doing, mate? He asked, his tone smooth and unweighted. Do you think you could help us understand how the Hellstorm found us, so we can escape him again? At the mention of the murderous satyr, the others fell silent, as if sobered from their own petty issues. You told me the rooks had him locked up, Pumblefoot answered, his young voice hollow and still edged with fright. But Storm has been in this world far more than 10 years. He must be getting old enough to access most of his power by now. Maybe their magic wasn't strong enough to hold him. Yeah, that's what Aiden said, Erbel said. Twist and the others looked to her in surprise. He told me that Storm had broken free and that he might be coming after you, Erbel went on, speaking to her brother. He'd warned me to warn you, but with all the other stuff, I forgot to mention it, she added with a grimace. Is he involved with all the stuff you told us? Yes, very much so, Mira answered. Jonas breathed a curse. When Idris said that he'd given Storm to the magpies, I stupidly just assumed it would be fine. We should have asked Idris to give Storm to Mama instead. Oh, that would have been a much better idea, Mira agreed, looking miserable. Twist nodded. He had to agree that the powerful gypsy witch would have been a much more knowledgeable custodian than the rooks. It had probably really just been a matter of time before Storm could break free from them. Twist frowned in concern, wondering just how tenacious Storm really was. Would they be doomed to flee from him for the rest of their lives? What about your magic, mate? Jonas asked Pumblefoot. Can you trap Storm? Pumblefoot gasped, staring back at Jonas in horror. No, no, never, the boy answered, shaking his head emphatically. Storm is Jack Frost's real apprentice. Jonas and Kima didn't seem to see this as a problem any more than Twist did. Pumblefoot glanced to the others, seeing nothing but mild confusion or derision at this revelation. Storm spent hundreds of years learning magic from Jack Frost himself, Pumblefoot clarified. And Jack Frost's power is second only to the Queen's. Storm might be the most powerful satyr alive. The changeling guise he used to wear would have limited him, but he doesn't need it anymore. And besides, he's a satyr. Even the weakest satyr is more powerful than a human ever could be. My magic is nothing next to this. Oh, Jonas said, clearly unnerved by this news. Then he frowned and looked at Twist. Twist, stop panicking, he said darkly. It's not helping. I know, Twist muttered, struggling to keep his fear in check. He could feel Jonas's anxiety murmuring in the buzzing at his own neck, but the other man seemed to have a better handle on his fright. Telling everyone else not to panic seemed to be helping him. Mira hurried to Twist's side, taking his hand. We'll be all right, darling. You'll see, she said, her emotions frightening his sight but colored with hope nonetheless. Twist nodded to her gratefully and struggled to find his bravery, even if just for her. But he's definitely still chasing us, Kima asked hesitantly. Pumblefoot nodded, looking very frightened again as well. Kima left Jonas to kneel beside her son, putting an arm around his shoulders. He seemed to calm a bit, taking deep breaths. Can he still find us, even if we enchant all of our charms? Jonas asked, waving a hand to the Vimana's crew. Yes, he'll find us again, Pumblefoot said, his gaze on the deck and his tone dismal. We can try to ward and protect ourselves all we like, but, he said, looking up to Jonas. He knows your name. He knows both of his, he added with a gesture to Twist. He probably has all of theirs from watching your dreams, he added with a glance to the Vimana's crew. We might be able to hide from Fae who don't know us, but that's all. I mean, if he can find my mother from one look at her face, Storm will always find a way. Kima looked to her son, clearly startled. What? When was he looking for me? Pumblefoot looked back at her, obviously confused by her question. He saw your face in Jonas's dream, and that's why he picked me to replace, he said, as if it were obvious. Twist hissed in pain as a sudden electric jolt of burning lightning shot through the buzzing at his neck. Jonas didn't move at all, except that his face paled visibly and his eyes went golden. Explain that this instant, Jonas bellowed at the boy, making Twist and the boy both flinch against the furious strength of his sudden anger. Kima shot to her foot. Oh, okay, I read that correctly. Kima shot to her foot, putting herself between Jonas and Pamut, but she appeared shocked as well, watching Jonas carefully with her hands up to hold him back if needed. Pamut peered around her at Jonas, clearly bewildered. Talk now, Jonas prompted sharply around Kima. I wasn't there, Pamut explained with a tight but otherwise surprisingly clear voice. But I heard the story. Storm followed your dreams every night. He knew you have survived the fires because he saw your dream right after. He saw my mother's face too, and knew that you had a vision of meeting her someday. But then you vanished, and he couldn't find you for years. He spent all that time searching for my mother because he knew you'd meet her. When he found out she was going to have a child, he took my place so he could meet you too. Jonas's expression melted into naked misery and dismay as he listened, his breathing growing labored, while the buzzing at Twist's neck turned into solid ice. For a moment, Kima stared back at Jonas, appearing horrified. Jonas turned his back on her swiftly, covering his face with his hands, and then promptly dropped to his knees as his shoulders began to shake. Twist felt his friend's pain, shock, and overwhelming guilt wash over himself, and he suddenly realized that Jonas's torment had spilled a few tears from his own eyes. Twist wiped them away and struggled to find any calm or clarity, soaked as he was in all of his friend's misery. Mira's hand shook Twist's shoulders suddenly. He turned to find her looking back at him with obvious worry, but her emotions were buried in Jonas's and thus invisible to Twist. She nodded pointedly at Jonas, as if urgently ordering Twist to do something about him. Twist looked back and found Pamut also staring at Twist as if asking why Jonas had reacted this way. Kima had frozen still, staring down at Jonas, her expression unreadable. The others on the deck appeared horrified and too shocked or confused to say anything as Jonas dissolved into silent sobs. Realizing that Mira was quite right and that Twist probably was the only one who might offer Jonas any comfort, Twist forced himself a step closer and think of something to say. Jonas, Twist asked gently. Jonas didn't move. His shoulders had stopped shaking, but he was still curled up on himself, kneeling with his head deeply bowed and his hands over his face. Pure, horrid, sticky guilt poured out of the buzzing at Twist's neck, making him shiver. Please, try to hear me, Twist went on. It's really not your fault. Jonas's hands dropped finally, but his head remained bowed and his emotions didn't rise from their torments, even by an inch. When he spoke, his voice was as hollow as a ghost's. Do you think I stop having visions when I pluck out my eyes? Arabelle gasped softly, staring at her brother in shock and dismay. Howell moved to speak, but then paused, as if frightened of saying something wrong. Even Quaid looked pained by Jonas's words, but he turned away with nothing to offer. Everyone else looked to Twist desperately. No, I really don't think that would work, Twist replied earnestly, moving a step closer still. Jonas, please, just look at me for a moment. Even a glance at Twist's eyes through Jonas's sight would surely calm him. Jonas had said that he saw a cool, calm white light in Twist's eyes, which sounded exactly like the fog Twist felt in Jonas's sight. Surely, just a glance would help. Twist moved another step closer, but Jonas's gaze didn't rise an inch, instead remaining down and hidden from Twist. A heavy sigh escaped Jonas, his spirit turning somehow even darker. I've destroyed everything good in the world. Twist glimpsed the true depth of his friend's sorrow and shuddered. The single glimmer of happiness that Jonas's sight had shown him, and an endless sea of death, was Kima's face on the day they had rescued her son. Jonas had built his hopes on that image for most of his life, knowing there would always be one good thing in his future. But now he knew that, by simply seeing that moment, he had doomed Kima and Pamut. His carefully built castle of hopes was scattered like sand at his feet. No, you didn't, Kima said. Jonas jerked at the sound of her voice and reached up to wipe at his face, as if only realizing he'd been crying at all. Twist was surprised to hear her speak. Her expression was cold and distant. Twist realized with a thrill of fright that she could just as easily say something meant to hurt Jonas as meant to calm him. After all, it was Jonas's vision that had caused one of the greatest tragedies of her life. You can't control your sight, Kima went on, her tone so flat that Twist still couldn't read her intent. You don't ask for visions. They attack you whenever they like. You never did anything to me or my son. Storm did all this, not you. Twist's mouth fell open in astonishment as he felt each of Kima's words pick away at the ice in Jonas's spirit. By the time she fell silent, the buzzing in Twist's neck had a strong coloring of surprise, confusion, and even a delicate flicker of hope. Remaining on his knees and his face still ruddy, Jonas turned to look up at her. His eyes were damp, but they were now a mossy, dusty, barely noticeable green color. You cannot forgive me, he said, shaking his head. You just can't. Kima's expression turned warmer as she glanced away from his eyes. There's nothing to forgive, but if I'm going to have my revenge on the monster that destroyed my family, I'm going to need help. No one's ever helped me as much as you have. Help me kill him, she finished, offering a hand to help Jonas to his feet. Jonas first looked to her hand in disbelief, but Twist watched with delicious relief as Jonas then took Kima's hand and rose back to his feet. His emotions felt precarious. Apologies, one moment. I read it as I see it. Okay. His emotions felt precarious, lost in the vast expanse between despair and gratitude, but his spirit seemed calmer. Kima's smile grew, as did her confidence, and she gave his shoulder a hearty pat. Jonas stared back at her as if she were a magical creature. Kima turned back to Pamut. Now, son, if your magic isn't enough, tell us what we need to kill Storm. Here we're going to take a chapter break. Ooh, I felt as if I can't really speak. However, I see Zombie Master stopped by. Zombie Master, hello, if you're still here. I know that you're lurking at the moment. Let's see. He said, Lady Robsy told me that it was your birthday last week, so happy birthday, mate. Domo arigato, Zombie. Hope you're doing well, my friend. And thank you for the birthday wish. Okay. Tonight, I am actually, speaking of my birthday, I am drinking a tea that one of my listeners slash friends got me for my birthday. It is called, and I believe I've talked about this tea in particular on this stream once because the name looks awfully familiar, but it is called Elixir of Luck. And the ingredients of this tea are cinnamon, orange peel, peach, apple, lemongrass, blue cornflower, and chamomile. Well, I'm going to be quite relaxed after I drink this tea. However, for those who may be wondering, my Taka, where, oh possibly where, can I find delicious tea like you just described on stream? Well, my dear listener, if you do not already know, allow me to tell you about a special tea shop in Seattle, Washington called Friday Afternoon. Remember I said that there's a non-sponsored sponsorship that is definitely not sponsored by anyone? Well, here we are. Friday afternoon, the tea shop in Seattle, Washington. If you go to their website, www.fridaytea.com, you will find a wide variety of teas that I'm pretty sure will not only tickle your senses or your taste buds, but also your senses because the tea I'm drinking smells so good right now. But we're not going to talk about the tea that I'm drinking tonight, even though it smells very nice. We're going to talk about a different tea. It is called Sorcerer's Study, which seems very apt for the chapters we just read. However, this tea blend, the Sorcerer's Study, is part of the TTRPG classes. That is tea like the drink and then tabletop RPG. So this is part of the TTRPG classes, spells, and potions collections. And there is a whole collection on site, actually. It is part of the spring fandom, which means actually you have exactly 1 month to put in an order for this tea if it tickles your fancy. However, the description of this tea goes as follows. Are you the spellcaster of your group? The wise, magical, powerful one? This may be the tea for you. The Sorcerer is a green and black tea blend with jasmine and smoky blue cornflower. Lush, floral, mysterious, and perfect for pairing with your favorite grimoire or dusty old tome. Ingredients: green tea, black tea, blue cornflower, and jasmine essence. Again, this tea, the Sorcerer's Study, is available until June 3rd. After that, you'll have to wait for either a very special sale or next spring. And we have two reviews. The first review from 2024, July 2024, well, last year, of course. This person wrote, my favorite. Apologies. My favorite. Sorcerer's Blend is mild but grounding, very slightly floral and smooth. With or without honey, this tea sings any time of the day. I will try it iced and will also likely enjoy it forever. And we have another review from 2021. This person wrote, "The perfect tribute. One of my long-standing D&D campaigns just ended and my DM gifted this tea to me in honor of my Luxolden? I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly. Is that an L or is that an I? That may be an L. I think that's... So what I'm seeing, just so everyone else knows, I'll put it in chat as well. It is spelled Loxodon. I am not 100% certain how to pronounce that, so I'm going to put this in chat here. That may be the type of sorcerer in D&D that I'm not too certain of, but we are getting ahead of ourselves, so let's start over. One of my long-standing D&D campaigns just ended, and my DM gifted this tea to me in honor of my Lazondan sorcerer, Bishop Oleander Fontaine. Oh, okay, that is a name. Who was an avid tea lover and sweet old grandpa to the party. Needless to say, I cried when the package arrived. This morning, I brewed a cup to enjoy with my breakfast, and I am in love. It's the perfect tea for autumn and curling up with a soft blanket, a good book, and a beloved familiar. I've decided that my Oli definitely stocks this blend in his tea house, the Merry Brew, and he definitely tells everyone it's from Friday. There you have it. Those are two reviews, both real, both 5 stars, only one verified. I'm going to say that they're both real reviews anyway. However, if this tea, or maybe perhaps you're curious about any other teas, I'll say like, I don't know, maybe the Fairy Queen or Anansi's Web, even the Clockmaker. I'm just naming my top 3 teas here. Go to their website, www.fridaytea.com, And again, that is www.fridayliketheday and tea like the drink.com. And I promise they did not pay me to do this. They did not bribe me. They're not holding my little kitties hostage and saying that we will skin them alive if you do not promote our teas. No, no. And again, as far as I know, they do not know I'm still doing this. I enjoy their teas. And so I talk about it every stream. So again, Friday afternoon, Seattle, Washington, www.fridaytea.com. I'm going to take another sip here. Hmm. Oh, I meant to actually talk about this tea a little bit. This is a new tea for me. And I can certainly taste the cinnamon. Now, there should be peach, apple, orange peel as well. I feel that the cinnamon is a bit overpowering in this tea. However, I do enjoy the smell of this tea. It is a very enticing smell, if you will. It is a smell that makes me think of sitting by the fireplace, December, maybe Christmas Eve, drinking this tea. That is what the smell makes me think of, and it may be the cinnamon, to be honest. Mm. It doesn't quite taste like Christmas. I will say it tastes like Christmas Eve. Hmm. And before we go back into reading, once again, everyone, thank you for joining this reading stream. I hope that you are enjoying the story as well as the reading of this story. And I've also said this before, but I cannot say it enough. I do thank you all for the support that these channels receive. I have to say channels now because I'm also streaming on YouTube right now. However, I do thank you all for the support that you give these channels, whether it is likes or follows, subscriptions, bits, you tell friends, you tell family, so on, so forth. Again, I do this as a hobby. I do it for fun, and it is rather heartwarming how many people come by to listen to me to read a story the best I can. So thank you all. And I mentioned this last stream, and I need to remember to add this to the rotation of quote unquote announcements. If you or someone you know has a book that is published, if you happen to have a book or know someone who has a story that is published that I can buy and read, preferably paperback form, but you would like to see it on this stream, give me a message either on Twitch or YouTube. If you found this stream through Blue Sky, you can also give me a message there. I am in the, well, not necessarily the business, but I am considering looking for new books and new stories, preferably by indie authors or self published authors that we can share with, well, the internet. And I want to take the time to say domo arigato to This Is My Fate Now. That is a username. Thank you for following. I hope that you're having a wonderful evening or whatever time of day it may be for you. And what does Christmas Eve taste like? Well, I have to put it into words now. It definitely has a taste of cinnamon and warmth. Maybe a taste of anticipation, if you will. As I drink this tea, I am reminded of anticipation for Christmas Day so you can go underneath the tree to open the presents. It is a joy and excitement that is not quite realized, but you appreciate it nevertheless because you're looking forward to it. It's almost as if it's a promise of something more coming, but you still enjoy that promise in the wait. That is what this tea makes me think of when I taste and smell it. Mm. Again, this tea, I do not think it's criminally delicious. That is the Fairy Queen. The Fairy Queen tea is definitely criminally delicious, in my opinion. And naturally, I also really like the Nancy Webb tea. The Nancy Webb tea is a kick in the mouth, a pleasant kick. It is not too sharp or painful, but is just enough kick to say, yes, maybe do not go overboard with this tea. And it's great. I enjoy it. The Clockmaker tea, which I do not think I have any more of. I need to buy more when it becomes available again. It is such a smooth tea. It is, it doesn't have a kick, it doesn't have a fruity taste or anything like that, but the tea just feels very smooth. I believe that is probably the tea that you'll drink on a rainy day. Of course, those are my three top teas from Friday afternoon, but who knows? Maybe one day I'll come across a tea that may dethrone one of the top three. We'll see. But with that, I believe it is time to go back to our story. I'll do a little stretch here. Make sure we are ready to go. Ooh, that actually felt very nice. So, with that, let us go into the next chapter. Pamut stared back at his mother in alarm, clearly too shocked by her question to answer it. You're going to kill a child? Arabelle gasped in horror before Pamut could come up with anything. Standing with Kima, Twist, and Pamut, Jonas turned around to find the Vimana's entire crew still standing together, watching him. Quay and Mira stood on the other side of the deck watching him as well. Twist shuddered as fierce shame shot through the buzzing at his own neck. Oh, hell, Jonas moaned, spinning back toward Twist and Kima as he obviously only now realized that his very recent breakdown had happened in full view of everyone on board. Fearful of losing him to another bout of dangerous emotions, Twist, Twist moved quickly. He took Jonas's head in both hands, holding the other man's startled yellow gaze in his own. It doesn't matter, Twist said firmly, forcing his best conviction. Nothing matters but killing Storm. Don't worry about anything else. Jonas's eyes shifted to gray and then started to take on a hint of green while Jonas allowed Twist to hold him still. Twist felt the other man's spirit fall back into a tentative level of calm and released him, but Jonas didn't look away from Twist's eyes. So we're really doing that? Quay asked. Twist glanced at him and found Mira standing beside him, looking disturbed as well. Kima caught Twist's eye with a meaningful glance. Kima's right, Twist said to Quay and Mira. I don't like the idea of killing anyone on purpose, but the fact is that the satyr will not stop trying to kill us. We must defend ourselves. Quay smiled at Twist with pride. That sounds perfectly natural to me. Well, Mira muttered, her expression now grim. That's a good point, dear. We already tried running away and trapping him, and none of it worked. But if someone must die, she said, her posture rising into resolve while her expression remained unhappy, then I certainly rather it wasn't you. Twist gladly took what support she could offer and silently hoped that he wouldn't have to engage in the violence himself. He glanced back to Kima to find her looking at him with quiet gratitude. Revenge, huh? Jonas asked, making them both turn to him. He looked a bit more stable now, like a dry leaf that had stopped tumbling in the lull of the wind. That sounds good. Kimo took his hand, looking at him with confidence. We can share it. That monster has done you a lot of harm too. Twist watched Jonas's spirit finally settle on her words, taking root and holding firm, while he looked back at her as if he could scarcely believe she was real at all. But he's just a child, Arabelle protested again, making them all turn. No, he isn't, Ozzy said softly. Satyrs live for hundreds of years. He only looks like a boy because of the guise. Arabelle looked to the rest of her own crew for aid. I agree with her, Howell offered. This sounds too drastic. Did anyone ask his opinion? Quay asked his crew. Because last I checked, this isn't his ship and this isn't his fight. You don't belong here at all, you filthy pirate, Howell growled back. You're just as much a filthy pirate as I am, no matter what you say, Quay roared. I know where you're from, you and your bloody brother. Your whole family are pirates, just like mine. You have nothing to do with my family, Howell exclaimed, stepping forward, his fists raised and his eyes aflame with hatred. And you never will. Twist grabbed Mira's hand and took her out of the firing line. Knock it off, both of you, Jonas bellowed sullenly, his voice bold enough to silence both men for an instant. Howell, stop trying to pick a fight with a dare, he said, turning to Quay with a more meaningful tone. You're better than this, and you have nothing to prove. Quay seemed to hear him, and his anger visibly dimmed, but Howell's expression turned bitter. Now then, Jonas added, glancing back to Howell as well. I'm the bloody captain of this ship, and I say stow the feud until we're not being chased by a murderous villain. Howell glared daggers at his nephew. I'm afraid that just owning a ship doesn't make you a captain, lad. You have to be worthy of command before you can claim it. Jonas stalled at this remark, clearly surprised to have his authority suddenly questioned. Twist glared at Howell, disgusted to see him use such a conniving tactic just to have his way. Still holding his hand, Kima glanced at Twist, Mira, and Quay and Pamut in turn. Do any of you have a problem with Jonas taking command? She asked him with prefect confidence. Surprised to be asked, they all shook their heads before anyone could come up with more of an answer. Kima put on a smug smile. And would all of you follow Jonas into battle? Kima asked. Of course, Twist answered easily. Without question. Yes, we have many times before, Mira offered. Jonas is a very good leader. Pamut nodded earnestly. When Kima looked to him, Quay gave a sigh and then mirrored her smug look. I can't think of any man I'd more gladly follow into battle. Twist felt the soft echoes of Jonas's shock at each reply, but Jonas kept most of it from his face. Howell, however, looked decidedly unamused by Kima's stunt. Well then, Kima said as she turned back to Jonas, looking rather pleased with herself. I think it's safe to claim it, Captain. Jonas's adoring smile was pure and unabashed as he looked back at her with brilliantly blue eyes. Twist tried not to chuckle as he found that, in that moment, he adored Kima himself. Jonas shook his head and took a breath before he looked calmly back at his uncle. Look, if you don't agree, you don't have to help, Jonas said to Howell. But don't get in our way and don't fight with my crew until this is done. All right? Howell didn't answer. He just stared back at his nephew in obvious frustration. Ozzy stepped forward, her shaded face hidden under the thick shawl she wore, but her posture strong and steady. I would like to help you, Howl, Arabelle, and Zell all looked at her in shock, but her husband stepped forward to join her. So, Badai, Philippe said, you may need a doctor before this is done. But, Howl gasped, these people, Ozzy said, cutting him off as she gestured to Jonas and his crew, came to help me when I was in desperate need. The creature they face is a magical one. My magic is nothing like Mama's, but I may still be able to help. At the very least, I can fight. Thank you, Jonas offered, clearly touched by the offer. I'm glad to have you. Ozzy's shawled head bowed in reply, while Philippe nodded as well. All right then, Jonas said, looking down to where Pamut still stood, watching them all with obvious anxiety. How do we kill a satyr? I don't know any spells like that, Pamut answered. What non magical things would kill him? Kima asked her son gently. Nothing can kill him, Pamut answered, his eyes flitting about as if he were desperate to avoid her gaze. He's a magical being. You can't kill a djinn either, or a dragon. But you can send his soul back to Feri, Ozzy offered. Pamut looked to her ungratefully. Could he just come right back? Jonas asked, frowning. Not if you force him to return, Ozzy replied. Kill the body he's wearing, and he'll be tossed back home. Then it might take him years to heal enough to return, and even if he does, he'll only be able to come to Earth as a changeling infant. You could buy yourselves easily 15 to 20 years apiece. Given the delay, he might not even try it. Then, how do we do that? Kima asked. Can we just shoot him? I'm not sure about that, Ozzy said, shaking her head. Pamut? Jonas asked, looking to the boy again. Pamut gave a vague and stiff shrug. A gun wouldn't really hurt him. The others waited for the boy to go on, but it swiftly became clear to everyone that he had no intention of being helpful. His gaze scurried over the deck, meeting no one's eyes. Now that Twist looked more closely, Pamut appeared to be struggling to hide that he was rather agitated. Twist recognized the desire to flee in the boy's taut posture, but Pamut held his ground nonetheless. Kima knelt down and looked her son in the eye. Pamut shifted uncomfortably, only glancing back at her here and there. Kima remained still and thoughtful. Storm stole you away from your family and made you a slave. You should want him gone just as much as I do. Why don't you want to help us? Pamut looked back to her as a ripple of horror washed over his face, and then just as quickly vanished into a poor attempt of nonchalance. You want to kill Storm, he answered finally, his tone ringing with misery no matter how he tried to hold it back. The Storm. He's the greatest satyr in the world. He's my master's true servant. I could study magic for 100 years and never come close to him. Kima watched, wide-eyed, as her son started to shout, his words coming faster now and increasing in emotion. Tears began to collect at the edges of his eyes, but he didn't seem to notice them. Storm's the very best. He gave up all this time on Earth just for my master. And he does everything right. I keep trying, but I fail every time because I'm not perfect. But he is. How can you want to kill someone perfect? He asked, fright appearing now on his flushed face as his tears finally broke free. Why can't you leave Storm alone? You can't hurt him, he said more softly, as crazed looking alarm washed over his damp face. I won't let you. Pamut pulled back an arm as a flashing ball of sparkling yellow energy appeared in his hand. Kima gapped back as they gasped. One moment. Oh, that's gape. Okay. Apologies, everyone. Pamuk pulled back an arm as a flashing ball of sparkling yellow energy appeared in his hand. Kima gaped back at him, too stunned to move away, but Jonas dove forward. He threw his open palm forcefully at the center of the boy's abdomen, knocking him backward a step and down to one knee. While Pamuk crumpled into himself, his breath clearly knocked out of him and his face awash with shock, Jonas knelt before him and took a firm hold of him, gripping each arm with a hand and forced the boy to look at him. The energy in Pamuk's hand vanished as he struggled to get his breath back, but he looked back at Jonas in pure terror. Jonas held him still for a moment, his naked gaze only just missing Pamuk's. "What are you doing?" Jonas asked, his tone as cold and hard as iron. "Storm doesn't love you, no matter how much you love him. But this woman does. If you're going to give anyone your loyalty, give it to her." The deck fell silent, save for Palmut's gasping breaths, while he stared back at Jonas and made no attempt to fight. Everyone else simply watched, stunned, while Palmut's tears returned with his breath. His posture deflated as he began to sob. Realizing that the danger was past, Jonas released him and stepped away. Kima moved swiftly, taking the boy into her arms, and Pamuk collapsed into her embrace. "I'm sorry," Pamuk muttered, his voice soaked in tears. "I'm sorry too," Kima said gently, rubbing at his back. "I didn't mean to push you. I didn't understand. But Jonas is right. Storm isn't your friend. He'd kill us all if he could. I just want you to be free of all of this." This time, Pamuk didn't counter her, but his sobs started to ebb either from exhaustion or possibly from seeing her point. Jonas put a hand on Kima's shoulder, his concern for her playing on his face. "We'll figure it out," Jonas said, gently now. "We got some time yet. We're safe for now, and I'm sorry for hitting him," Jonas offered softly. "But he'll be fine. We all will." Kima nodded, still holding her son close, but she didn't look up to him. Twiska only marveled at Jonas's resilience. Only a few minutes ago, he'd been literally floored and sobbing over a terrible revelation, and now he was already offering comfort to Kima. He also been the first to move when Pamuk suddenly became a threat, and he'd taken control of his crew and his ship mere minutes after he lost his composure completely. Twiska only admired his friend's endless courage. Jonas was right. Without him leading them, they'd certainly be able to work anything out. Here we will take a quick chapter break. I do not know if anyone noticed, but I actually panicked a little in the middle of that story, in the middle of that chapter, I should say. Ozzy and Kima have somewhat similar voices. I tried to give an accent to Ozzy, and Kima have her more deliberate with her speech, but they have a similar tone and voice. Switching between the two like that it threw me off a little bit. But despite all of that, everyone, I do hope that you are enjoying the story so far as well as the reading of this story. And now that I've thought about it, how am I going to differentiate between Storm and Pamut? At the moment, because Storm took over as Pamut, Storm was a changeling, a satyr. I had a voice for Storm when we first met him, and I assumed that he was a young lad going through puberty. So it stood to reason to me that maybe Pamut would have a similar voice. But now that Storm has shown his true colors, I have yet to change his voice, and there's a chance that they will both have the same voice, so I apologize for any future confusions and future readings. Nevertheless, thank you all for joining this reading stream so far. Whether you're here live in Twitch or YouTube, or you're listening to the VOD. And once again, I do appreciate all the support that you give this or give these channels. There's two channels that you give these channels. And with that, I believe we're going to go into the final chapter for the evening. Twist leaned against the rail at the wide bank of windows at the far side of the kitchen and looked down at the thick gray clouds and flashing lightning that seemed to fill the world beneath them. They noticed the thunderstorms build in the sky below, stretching out toward every horizon before the sun started to fall from the sky. Now the gray clouds were licked with the golden light of sunset, and Twist could see nothing but storms beneath them. For now, their attitude did seem out of the storm's reach, and the sky around them was still clear. But Twist could have sworn he heard of thunderstorms that could reach into high atmosphere. Once he calmed down into a numb-looking state, Pamut had nodded when Ozzy gently asked him to sit with her to discuss what needed to be done. Ozzy clearly had enough knowledge of her own to at least start to rule things out, and only wanted Pamut to confirm things for her. Kima remained at his side, but she no longer tried to get answers out of him. Pamut, for his part, seemed to actually be trying to realign his loyalties. He made no overt protest to helping to plan Storm's doom. Everyone else took this as a chance to find a moment of peace after all that had happened. Mira didn't hum to herself as she made a pot of tea. She was clearly lost in thought while she watched the kettle sit on the fire. Quay had accepted Mira's offer of tea, and he followed her and Twist to the kitchen, but Twist suspected that his reasoning had more to do with avoiding Howl than with wanting anything to drink. He now sat silently at the table, staring at nothing at all with eyes full of thoughts. When Jonas had finished Mira's invitation and gone to his cabin alone, his emotions didn't feel at all that dangerous to Twist, so Twist made no attempt to join him. When he was probably craving peace and quiet even more than the rest of the crew. Adair, Kima's voice called as she entered the room with a large burlap sack that, by the markings, had once held a load of onions. Pamut and I did catch something, by the way. Quay woke from his thoughts to look at her, and Mira gave a happy tone, coming to meet her as Kima put the bag down on the tabletop and opened it. How's the planning going? Twist asked. Kima paused to look back at him with a troubled light in her eyes. I wasn't helping anymore. I really don't know anything about magic, but it sounds like we need weapons made of iron. Would steel work? Quay asked, getting to his feet. He opened a drawer and pulled out a large kitchen knife and examined it. This is steel. I guess, Kiba answered. I'll ask Pamut. Is Pamut doing all right? Mira asked her. Do you think he'll like a cup of tea? Kima looked gratefully at Mira. He's doing all right. Thank you for asking. I don't think he really would have fought us. He was just very upset. He's calmer now. I think he sees everything more clearly. Oh, getting the wind knocked out of you will do that, Adair offered, retaking his seat now that the knife was back in the drawer. Kima didn't seem to appreciate the comment, but she didn't say anything about it, and she happily accepted Mira's offer of a supportive smile and a gentle pat on the arm. Well, Kima said, turning her attention back to the bag and digging inside. There were a lot of rabbits, so I caught a few, she said, pulling a pair of lifeless animals out of the bag to place on the table. And I got this too, she added, pulling out a pheasant sized bird with spotted black and white plumage and holding it up to look at it curiously. I don't know what it is, she added with a shrug, putting it down, but it should be all right to eat. Mira looked down at the rabbits with restrained alarm. How nice, she muttered, clearly somewhat disturbed to see the animals whole and all their fur, but very clearly dead. Twist told himself sternly that the darling little gray one was most certainly not actually looking at him with that slack and haunted expression. That's not a bad haul, Quay mentioned admiringly as Kima produced a second bird of unknown species. Oh, Kima said suddenly, reaching into the bag for something else. Here, Mira, I found this for you. Kima held up a small bundle of cloth and string with a bunch of tiny purple flowers and a few slightly bent but brilliantly green leaves sticking out of the top. With the sight of it, Mira gave a hmm, Mira gave a delighted sound, and her face washed over with joy. Oh, how darling! She exclaimed, gently taking the bundle from Kima. I tried to get the whole root, just like you asked, Kima said, smiling back to her. And I found them growing all over an open field, so it should be a strong plant. Ouch! I'm sure I can make it happy here, Mira said, before reaching out with her free hand to give Kima a half hug. Thank you so much. This is the first plant of my new garden. I think I'll call it Susan. Susan? Twist balked, startled by the choice. I met a Susan in San Francisco. She was a charming little girl with ribbons in her hair. I think it's a good name for the sweet little plant. You really live in your own little world, don't you, love? Quay said wistfully to Mira. While Mira looked back to Quay with innocent confusion, the kettle began to whistle. Mira looked to it, then at the plant in her hands, as if unsure who to attend to. Twist stepped closer, silently offering to take the plant. Mira gratefully handed it to him and then turned for the kettle. You're starting a garden, then? Twist asked, examining the plant in his hands. It seemed to be doing all right, considering it had been forgotten in a bag for a little while. Some of the leaves hung at angles, off bent stems, but the flowers were still struggling valiantly to hold their heads high. Oh, yes, Mira replied, putting the lid back onto the teapot now that it was full. I thought since we have our own ship now, I could keep some plants. I'll make the ship a little. I'll make the ship a bit prettier and make it feel more like a home. You can't have a ship with no plants in it, she added seriously. Certainly not, Twist agreed instantly. His own definition of something called a home could use some fine tuning after all. I think that's a wonderful idea, darling. I thought you might, she replied with another sunny smile. Now, she said, glancing about the room, where did I put those pots I ordered? Oh, here it is, she said, spotting an unopened crate among the few that stood in the corner. Do you want a hand skinning deals? Quay asked Kima. Twist glanced to them to find that Kima had already produced a knife and was stretching out one of the rabbits, out on top of the now flattened sack on the table. Thank you, Kima replied, nodding. Darling? Mira asked, bringing his attention back. Would you be a dear and help me take this up to our cabin? I really shouldn't deal with plants in the kitchen. They're not always good to eat. Certainly, Twist answered, handing her back the plant and then stooping to lift the small crate. It was heavier than he expected for the size. Oh, I see now, he added, noting the markings on the side of it as he stood up carrying it. When I read pots on the order, I thought it was something to do with cooking. Mira told Kima and Quay to help themselves to the tea once the hourglass she turned over said it was done. They thanked her and started in on their work. Twist followed Mira out of the room, silently pleased to have an excuse to leave the room and not have to witness the slaughter. Knowing that the delicious cooked slice of meat was eaten. Apologies, everyone. It seems like I'm having a difficult time here. Knowing that the delicious cooked slice of meat one was eating had once been a living creature was all well and good in theory. Seeing an animal with a face turned directly into food was another thing entirely. Alone in their shared cabin, above the kitchen, Twist pried off the top of the crate and found a selection of clay flower pots, a few tools, and a small sack of soil inside, and so understood the weight. Mira set to work immediately, first untying the bundle on the wide window sill to inspect the plant.
Oh, this would do nicely,
She mentioned, looking lovingly at the tiny life. Twist watched as Mira then took care to select the perfect pot from her collection of three, picking a glazed white pot with bright blue lines painted around it, and then began the delicate and gentle business of planting Susan in her new home. Mira began to hum to herself as she worked, not obviously noticing Twist's attention at all. Given the stressful events of the day, the blanket of the thunderstorms below them, and the fact that Kima was entirely too comfortable with the nature of mortality for Twist's taste, Twist found the sight of Mira lovingly tending to a tiny, pretty, helpless life to be rather soothing. It made their future success seem more plausible to him as well. They will have to survive now. They had a home to return to after their battle. They even had a plant to take care of.
There.
Mira said, standing back to admire her work. The plant stood primly in its pot now, the color of purple flowers looking quite pleasing against the white and blue of the pot. Mira turned to Twist with a smile, clutching a small watering can.
Dear, would you get Susan a drink while I clean up?
She asked, offering him the can.
Of course.
Twist replied, taking it and turning for the door. Just outside his cabin door, Twist heard a startling sound and paused. It sounded distinctly like the jagged intake of breath that followed a sob. It seemed to be coming from beyond Jonas's just ajar cabin door. Twist's attention dove for the buzzing at his neck, where he found a dull, quite distinctly controlled chill, but no sign that Jonas was very upset.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Arabelle's quivering voice muttered so softly that Twist had to creep closer to the doorway to make out her words. Frightened of intruding but far too curious to leave, Twist remained as hidden as he could while listening through the crack. Someone inside, likely Arabelle by the temper of the voice, gave a deep sigh.
You never talk about these things.
She said, softly, sounding more calm.
You needed to know.
Jonas replied, his voice smooth and unfettered.
Adair is just as much our uncle as Howell is, really. Regardless how crazy things ended between him, Mom, and Dad, I believe him when he says he really loved Mom. I mean, it's very strange to think that he was in love with her, but still. He knew her when she was a girl, Arabelle said, sounding astonished by her own thoughts. He could tell us what she was like, what the rest of our family was like, everything Howell didn't know. I'm sure he could, Jonas agreed. They grew up together.
There was a pause. Arabelle sounded like she was calming down. Twist silently realized that he was shamelessly eavesdropping on a conversation that he had no business hearing and told himself, firmly, to back away.
Why didn't Howell ever tell us?
Arabelle's voice asked, stilling Twist. It sounded cold and hurt.
He just told us Adair was a bad man and left it at that. Maybe he feels bad that he wasn't there when the fire started,
Jonas offered.
Also, Dad was supposed to fight Adair, not Howell. Dad might have lived if Howell had let him go, but I'm sure it's easier to put all that blame on Adair.
Twist nodded, imagining that this was probably quite true. Then he frowned, realizing that he was still eavesdropping.
Do you blame Howell?
Arabelle asked hesitantly, while Twist forced himself to turn and silently began to step away. The buzzing at his neck tightened suddenly, stopping Twist just in earshot. No, I don't blame Howl, Jonas answered, his voice dull and lifeless. I don't blame Adair either. Twist followed Jonas's thoughts far too easily, knowing that Jonas only blamed one person for his parents' death. Even after all they had learned about Jack Frost and the Summer Fae and all of it, Jonas still only blamed himself. But Arabelle, but did Arabelle know that? Had he told her about the vision he'd seen before the fire? You're right, Arabelle said, sounding stronger with certainty. It's those bloody evil fairies. They're the ones to blame. Good heavens, she said, a spell in her voice. Doesn't it feel wonderful to have someone to blame? The tightness and the buzzing at Twist's neck didn't loosen an inch, but when Jonas answered, Twist heard forced lightness in his voice as well. Yeah, it's great. He lied. Twist hurried away down the stairs as quietly as he could, hoping that Jonas wouldn't feel his own flash of disappointment and frustration thanks to the distance. Even if Jonas could open up to his sister and share more emotion and truth with her than he could in past years, he clearly still couldn't tell her about his own misplaced guilt. Twist doubted he ever would. I just got the worst luck in the world, Kima was saying when Twist stepped into the kitchen. Bad things happen to me. Always have. It's never anyone's fault. Twist paused, looking to her with confusion at such a strange declaration. There was a pile of spotted feathers on the table, along with three now naked rabbits, and Kima and Quay seemed to be in the process of pulling handfuls of feathers off of the two birds. Sorry, Kima muttered with a smirk at Twist's expression. I was just complaining to Adair about life, she offered as explanation for her previous remark. I came to fill this, Twist muttered, holding up the watering can. You were not, Adair said to Kima, while Twist turned away to the water faucet that fed from the tank hidden below the floor and silently chided himself for being so awkward. Why, Kima? You might just be the most well adjusted person on the ship. We all love a chance to blame other people for all our ills. That never solves anything, Kiba protested with a grin in her voice. You're lying to yourself if you do that. Sure, Quay answered, grinning too when Twist glanced over his shoulder at them. But lying to yourself is a wonderful excuse to sulk. I love a good sulk. Kima laughed, but as Twist turned back to them now that the water can was full, he suspected that the pirate's words were more true than false, despite the fact that he framed them as a joke. Twist excused himself and left again to return to Mira. Kima and Quay offered a nod and waved to him, and they resumed their conversation as if Twist had never been there at all. Twist returned to his cabin to find Mira already speaking before he entered the room. And you'll see lots of places too, she said to Susan. We're always traveling. I'm sure you really like it here. Twist's footsteps caught Amira's attention as he entered the room. Oh, thank you, dear, she said, coming to take the watering can from him. I was just telling Susan all about our new home. That's nice of you, he said, trying not to let her see how odd that sounded to him. Mira gave him a knowing look. Plants, plants grow much better if you talk to them. I'm sure you know better than I do about plants, Twist replied honestly. Mira turned back to Susan. Here you go, she said, pouring a bit of water onto the soil. Now you got a good sunlight and nice water and clean air. You'll do just fine here with us. Welcome to your new home, sweetie, she added, gently bopping one tiny flower with her fingertip. Twist smiled at them both, noting that Susan already looked happy. Mira also appeared much more at ease than she had been before. Twist imagined that Kima and Quay, as well as Jonas and Arabelle, were all feeling better now that they had a chance to share their feelings with someone else, or distract themselves with someone else's troubles. Twist had yet to voice his own reactions to recent events, but even so, knowing that his crew was finding connection and comfort was enough to put his own spirit more at ease. And with that, we are now at the end of the reading stream. Ooh, I'm looking ahead here. Either I think I will split up the final parts of this book over two streams. So there may be two rather shorter streams for the reading stream next week and the week after. Oh my feet hurt. But everyone, despite how my feet feel, thank you for joining this reading stream. I hope that you enjoyed the story as well as the reading of the story. Mira's voice still being the hardest voice to do in this entire story. My goodness. Nevertheless, I do hope that you enjoy the story as well as the reading of the story. We will have another reading stream next Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, same channels. With that, I hope that you all have a wonderful evening, a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Until then, take care and bye bye.